Spoiler alert from Mushoku Tensei Volume 5. If you haven't read this volume, then I suggest you do so before continuing on to this video. Rudeus has now made it to the Millishion continent. But little does he know, someone important is waiting for him. Hello everybody, this is the Anime Bro here, and welcome to another video. And today, I'll be reviewing Mushoku Tensei Volume 5. Now before this video starts, please like, share, and subscribe for more videos just like this. And come back next time as we talk about Volume 6. And now, let's begin the video. So the first thing I want to talk about is the story. Now, in terms of the story, I do like Volume 5. The main event that happens is Paul and Rudeus reuniting. And it's completely different than what I expected. I was expecting this happy, everyone is crying and is happy to actually see each other. But instead, we actually start off with them actually fighting with each other. Because of miscommunication, each of them actually don't know what the other one has been going through. When Rudeus tells his story, he tries to make it all amazing and wonderful. And because of that, Paul thinks Rudeus had a blast going on this wonderful journey, when in reality, we know he was going through so many struggles just to get to where he is now. And when Rudeus sees his party, he thinks that Paul was just hanging out with all the girls and just doing whatever he wanted. But in reality, he was doing his best to look for his family and others that got lost in the teleportation incident. And it's a really interesting meetup that they have. Instead of being happy, they fight each other and all this goes pretty bad. Norn actually hates her brother because she knows what Paul's been going through. And eventually when Rudeus goes back to his inn, Eris hates Paul because he made him sad. And she definitely thinks that he doesn't deserve to be sad. And I really do like that. It shows a little bit of discomfort between it, even though it was supposed to be a happy moment. Now, there was something I really didn't like, and it was the fact that it kind of fell downhill after Rudeus and Paul make up. There wasn't really much to the story after that. It just seemed like they were trying to buy some time until the end. We get a side story with Eris, which was okay. It wasn't really that mind-boggling. And we just get a little bit of Rudeus meeting his other family, which is alright and pretty cool. But it's still nothing much. The main event happened in the beginning, and everything else was just to add more pages at the end, in my opinion. I will say though that the Flitz's extra story is still a pretty good one. I may have not liked the Eris one, but Flitz's story was pretty cool. Instead of showing the mindset of Fitz or any of the bodyguards, it showed the mindset of the commoners that were there and their loyalty to the princess. So I do see more of a Game of Thrones vibe coming from Fitz's story, and I'm really excited for that. But honestly, it was still kind of a bit disappointment at the very end. Okay, now let's talk about some characters. Now, honestly, I was going to talk about one new character, but then I realized it's best to just talk about the two reoccurring characters that we have, Norn and Paul. And we're first going to start off with Norn. So Norn is a little girl who is the spitting image of her mother. Now, when we first meet Norn in this volume, she's protecting her father from Rudeus. Because of their meeting, Rudeus was punching him until Norn stopped him from doing so. And because of this interaction, she hates her brother. Now, the reason why she hates Rudeus from this is because a while ago, when Norn was really sick, Paul did everything he could to make sure that Norn was better. He didn't leave her side until she was better. And that was one of the moments that eventually made her love her father so much. And because of this, became very protective of him if someone actually ridiculed him. Now, we don't get this from her perspective. We actually get it from Paul's perspective. So we kind of already know that he is a good father. And throughout the book, she has not forgiven Rudeus for what he's done. Even though Paul tells her that Rudeus and him have made up, she doesn't forgive him yet. And then the final character that I'm going to talk about is Paul. So the last time we actually met with Paul was in Volume 1. And we got some moments where we actually looked into his mind and understood what he was thinking about. And the Paul here is totally different from the Paul in Volume 1. The Paul here has gone through so much tragedy in the years since the incident. With so many years looking for his family and not finding a single one, he became so depressed that he eventually became addicted to alcohol. And because of not finding his family, he had thoughts of them not actually being alive and that some of them may have died. And because of that, it physically changed him from a young looking man to basically a drunken fool. Now, even though he was an addict, the one thing he never did was make sure that Norn was sad. No matter what, Norn was the only hope that gave Paul a reason to live. And that was something that made him push through the story. Paul's tale in this book is a very tragic one. It's really sad to see him go through such a devastating thing. And in some cases, he actually believed that it was his fault that his family got teleported. He remembers the days when he was making enemies with everyone and nobody really liked him. And he thought that someone set a trap to teleport his whole family out of here. But eventually, after finding Rudeus and eventually making up with him, he's now on his journey to actually look for his family. Rudeus kinda gave him the hope that his family was out there. And I'm looking forward to when we get to meet Paul again. And hopefully when we do meet him again, it's with the whole family. With Zennis, Aisha, and Leela. Hopefully we get to see that someday. Alright, now let's talk about world building. Now we don't really have any races, so I'm going to be talking about location. And the one location that most of this part takes place in is Millishion, the capital of Millis. Now to explain Millishion, it is like the Vatican City. It is the capital of the major religion in this world that I have forgotten. Sorry about that. Here lies where most of the members of its church and some of its holy knights live. Now it's a normal city. It's just that most of it is based off of a theocracy or governments ruled by religious figures instead of an actual democracy or king in some way. And some geography in the city is that a lake sits in the center of it with a white palace in the very center of that lake. So that is a thing. I don't know if it's a cathedral, but it's a palace, and it's white. There's a golden cathedral and silver headquarters for the Adventurers Guild. At the edges of the city are 7 towers. This is basically to watch over the city, and also the cool thing about this is that those things actually protect from flooding. So during the last volume, there was a time where Rudeus couldn't actually move because it was constantly raining, and what that would cause is major flooding if you had not prepared for it. So those towers help with that. Now in the city itself, there are 4 districts. One is the residential area where most of the people live. It has a combination of both the commoners and the nobles. Another district is the commercial district, where some of the businesses are. It mostly has the auction house and a blacksmith. Next is the Adventurer District. Now that name is self-explanatory. Adventurer stuff is in this area. So that is the inns, the shop for gear, and even a bar if you're feeling bored. And also in this area is the slums. And in the slums is a slave auction house. Now, I'm kind of guessing that slavery is allowed in this religion because in our world, some religions actually are totally against that. So I don't know a comparison to it. And then finally, we got the last district, which is the Divine District. This is home to the members of the church and the Holy Knights. Cathedrals could be found here too, which makes sense because this is where most of the religious figures actually stay in. Now, this is one thing I actually find interesting about it is there is a faction in the city that wants to move demons away from the continent. So basically pointing out straight up racism. And we actually do get to see that in the story right before they have to leave. Someone is actually denying Rudeus, Eris, and Richard access to the central continent because of Richard. And it is straight up like a racist thing. It's not fear, it's more of hate, really. Which is a very sad thing to experience. But yeah, that was all I could find on this location. There wasn't really much of races, and honestly, there wasn't much to learn about the religion itself, so I couldn't really talk more about it. Alright, now let's talk about some iconic moments. So the first one that I want to talk about is Rudeus and Paul meeting up. Now, like I said before, this was not what I was expecting when Rudeus and Paul meet up. I was expecting a happy moment where they all cry and just, be grateful that they're alive, but no. Like I said, because of miscommunication, Paul thought that Rudeus was having a fun time, and Rudeus thought he was just messing around with ladies while his family was out. And what this eventually happened is they eventually get into a fight, which then made Norn hate Rudeus. Now this is a really important moment because it shows the difference in perspective. Rudeus was actually happy to see Paul, and when he told his story, he was just trying to make it sound like a good journey. But Paul mistook it for him having a vacation, and then that got Rudeus mad, making him think that Paul was just hanging out with other girls while their family was actually stuck somewhere. So I think it was a really good moment. Then next I have Eris comforts Rudeus. So after Rudeus and Paul have their fight, Rudeus goes to the inn all depressed. And when Eris actually goes and sees him, she actually gets angry that someone made Rudeus upset. Eventually when Rudeus says what happened, Eris was ready to go out there and beat Paul up because of what he did. Which honestly I think she definitely would have won. But instead of actually going out there and beating Paul up, what she actually tries to do is comfort Rudeus. And during a time like this, he really did need that. And I just like moments where Eris and Rudeus just have time to just, comfort each other whenever they feel down. And then the next moment that I have is Paul and Geese's talk. So while Eris is comforting Rudeus, Paul and Geese have a talk on what had happened. Paul talks about how Rudeus should have looked for his family instead of having this adventure, and Geese kinda listens and gives advice to what he should have been thinking. And this also shows another skill that Geese has, which is to listen to people and come up with solutions that help out with others. And what Geese tells Paul is that Rudeus is just a kid. The fact that he could do all that stuff is amazing on itself, but he's just a kid. And the fact that he came from one of the worst places to come from, the demon continent, should be a good enough reason to actually be happy that he's alive. And it's also this that Geese tells him to not think of Rudy as some warrior, but think of him as like Norn. Because he knows that Rudeus can do so much of all of these amazing things, Paul forgets that Rudeus is just a child. Comparing him to Norn eventually gets his mindset and realizes what he's done. And I do like the moment because it leads up to the next moment that I have, which is Paul and Rudeus make up. So after each of them go through their day with Eris comforting Rudeus and Paul talking to Geese, they both go to a bar and actually feel bad of what happened. Paul felt sad that he never just hugged Rudeus and be glad he came along, and Rudeus feels bad that he wasn't actually looking for his family. But in the end, it didn't really matter. Rudeus hugs Paul, and Paul starts crying, and eventually it all ends in a happy ending, somewhat. And it's a good journey that these guys go through in just this volume. They misunderstood and hit each other. Then they get comforted and also talk to people. And then eventually they make up and realize that The most important thing is that they're alive to begin with. And then eventually we get to my final moment. And I think it's kind of my favorite moment of Volume 5, and that is the greyrat family dinner. So after Paul and Rudeus make up, Rudeus wanted to talk to Paul for business reasons, but it eventually turns out just to be a family dinner. Now, Eris also joins along, but I think it's fine that she does that, because in the family dinner, there is Rudeus, Paul, Norn, and Eris. Two people that really made up, and the other two people that hate the other person that they didn't come along with. I like their interactions and also their mindsets that they have about each other, and I also just like the fact that it's just a normal family dinner. Even after the incident that they've gone through, they could just sit down and eat like a family. And I hope that in the far future, when everyone's back together, they can have another family dinner just like this. And that is all the iconic moments that I have for you. If you have any other moments that you really liked, then comment down below what they are. Alright, now let's end this video. So if I were to rank this volume, I would rank it a B. I love the family drama that happened here. We get to see Rudeus and Paul interact with each other for the very first time, and we get to see the mindset of a lot more people than just Rudeus. But the one thing I don't like is that everything happens in the beginning. After Rudeus and Paul make up, that's basically it for Volume 5. They have extra stories, but I think they play more as just to add more pages to the book than to actually give it a satisfying ending. I never cared about the extra stories, except, like I said, Flitz's, which is very shame because the other ones did have interesting extra stories that gave on what the other characters were doing. But with this one, it was not that good. Cliff's side of the story was very boring and just a tale about an arrogant boy who got humbled. And also, Roxy's one was just a continuation of the last extra story we got, which I liked on Volume 4, but now I couldn't really care less. It's a really big downside to this volume. I wonder how many of you guys actually consider this to be one of your favorites. I do like the interactions with the family, but there was not much to it. In fact, one thing I think could have helped this story was actually to see what was Norn thinking, because she actually is an important character in this story, and we didn't get any thoughts on her, so that actually kind of irritated me a bit. But if you think I'm wrong and think this should be higher or lower, then comment down below what you would rate this. To me, it has a great start, but honestly just ended very poorly. Alright, and that is the end of this video. If you really enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe for more videos just like this. And come back next time as I continue on to Volume 6. The journey of Rudeus's trip across the world is almost over, and I wonder how it will end. And as always, I am the Anime Bro, and see you guys later. Peace!